So, what's going on with Conan Exiles? After the mess that was the launch of the Age of Heroes, Funcom announced the game would be entering a period of time in which they'd focus on fixing what the game has, rather than piling new content on top. As of writing, we are past the 6-month mark on this unofficial Age of Fixes, and to be honest, not a lot has happened. Why is that, and what can we realistically expect in the future? Well, today we're going to try to find out. To start, let's recap what Conan Exiles is facing. Since around 2020, the game went through an extended period of content additions beginning every 3 months and eventually becoming every 6. This piled tons of content on top of the game, which sounds great, and in some cases was, but it was also built upon a foundation of sand. As covered in the 2024 and Ahead producer letter, project director Rodney Harper made it clear why. Conan Exiles was never intended to be a live service. Funcom developed it to be a finished product at launch with the intention to then move on and make another game afterwards, as many studios do. Of course, Conan became an unprecedented success for Funcom, and thus they pivoted to support the game over time with more DLC, updates and so on, and eventually the Aegis system. However, because of how the game was designed, it wasn't built for expansion, creating a lot of technical issues. That, alongside a growing pile of unaddressed technical debt over the years, led to a ton of problems for the majority of players, from graphical bugs and dodgy AI, to hard crashes and key features just being completely broken. It goes without saying, but it just couldn't go on like that, and thus the unofficial Age of Fixes was announced in January 2025. The first hotfix in this Age of Fixes came at the end of January, with a major update in March that fixed some issues and unfortunately created some others. There was then a series of hotfixes in April and May, and since then it's been very quiet. Why is that? Well, I think there's a few reasons. Firstly, this might be obvious by now, but I'm not sure the devs will be sticking to the previous update cadence of one major patch every 6 months with a minor patch in between. To be honest, it wouldn't make much sense to me if they did. It just kinda seems arbitrary. If they're only focusing on fixes, it's probably best to put the patches out when they're good and ready, not to rush things for a deadline or leave things out for another 3 to 6 months. Secondly, if we're being honest, some of Conan's issues are not that simple. One issue causes another, which thus causes even more. I don't doubt there's a fair amount of spaghetti code going on behind the scenes, especially with the context of how Conan was never really built for expansion. I'm not the most tech-savvy person myself, so I can't say I've got any great authority on it, but I would imagine a good part of reducing the technical debt of the game, which is quite important, is stuff we might not necessarily see. Lastly, though I don't know the exact numbers, we know the Conan team is likely a small one, and it has been for some time. Funcom has over 500 employees across 5 studios working on a variety of different things, but the Conan team is just generally quite small from all the info we have on it. Of course, there is also the spice-infused elephant in the room, Dune Awakening. By seemingly all measures, Dune has been a huge success for Funcom. If we're being realistic, I really doubted we'd hear anything about Conan whilst Dune Awakening was still in its launch window. Though Funcom have publicly stated that the Conan and Dune teams don't share or siphon resources, I imagine the marketing team is shared across all Funcom properties and partner releases like Aloft. When you're launching a new game, especially one that has a lot of interest like Dune, you just don't want to take any interest or resources away from pushing that launch, thus I really wasn't expecting to hear much, if anything at all. Now that Dune is out though, it is possible we might start to hear more. There's been no indication that Funcom consider the Age of Fixes done, and I certainly hope not. There's still a ton of stuff that needs to be fixed. It's also possible we might see the Conan team pick up a tiny bit more steam as the Dune Awakening team is redistributed. From my research, after the critical launch period of any game, teams are usually rearranged to be more lean and efficient with maintaining and adding to that game. Of course, if there's staff that don't really need to be used on Dune Awakening anymore, could some of them end up going back to Conan Exiles? It's possible. I don't want to sound too optimistic on that front, of course. Though I am an optimist, I am not expecting miracles. There's also the potential of a remaster in the future, something which I think Funcom are probably acutely aware of. Even if Conan Exiles gets fixed, it's still an old game running on aging and improper infrastructure, both in how it wasn't built for expansion, but also the engine and the inner workings, and the limits that have to be put on it to get it to run somewhat well on PlayStation and Xbox, especially the older variants. Funcom may plan to fix up this version of Conan Exiles and eventually make a remaster for current gen consoles and PCs on Unreal 5 in the future. I do think that's quite a likely scenario. This version of Conan Exiles could remain for the older gen consoles and obviously lower spec PCs, whereas the remaster would probably be a bit more intensive and demanding of your hardware, but could probably start off from a better foundation, and generally just be less limited in what it can do because it has to cater to that older hardware. To be perfectly clear, I've not heard anything of the sort, but I do think it's likely. It just makes a lot of sense, plus a remaster of Conan would be a lot easier than creating a whole new game. I've discussed this in depth before in a separate video. I think a remaster or a remake is more of a question of when rather than if, unless they go down the sequel road. Looking forward to the future though, what is going to happen with Conan's Age of Fixes? Well, I think we're probably in it for the long haul. No reasonable person was expecting this to be done in a few months, there's just far too many issues built up. I thought we were maybe looking at 9-12 months, but it could very well be longer. The devs have a lot to do, and to be honest, the current pace hasn't exactly blitzed a lot of issues. As for if the team will continue to fix the game, I actually think they will. There are a few different reasons. They entirely own the IP, it's retained a fanbase over almost a decade, but perhaps most importantly, the game can still demonstrably make money. Though we don't have any financial data, the Black Lotus Bazaar has a ton of money-making potential and likely has already made a nice bit for Funcom. Conan has cultivated a healthy role-playing community on both PC and consoles, which, in my view, are the people who are most likely to engage with these microtransactions, with regular PvE players probably being just behind them. One thing that does affect that potential revenue stream and how lucrative it is people just not being able to play the game properly. If they can make the game more stable, it would increase confidence in the game and thus confidence in making purchases from the bazaar. Money is, of course, the great driving factor for almost every product. I wouldn't think Funcom would just want to abandon Conan and thus abandon that potential revenue stream, but, well, stranger things have happened in this industry. All in all then, what's going on with Conan Exiles and the Age of Fixes? While some small improvements have been made since this process began, there's still a huge amount of work for Funcom to do and the start has been relatively slow. The team have been very quiet, but to be honest that's not necessarily anything new. Communication wasn't great even before now, and though a lot of people wanted to see a living document, a Trello board, a newsletter, something to tell us what they're working on, we haven't seen anything of the sort yet. If they're working with a tiny team or the fixes are ultra complex, I can see why they wouldn't want to speak about a potential fix if it doesn't materialise for months to come, but as always communication is key, and it avoids the situation we're in now where people wonder what's even happening. I don't think the Age of Fixes is over. I think this period of silence has been somewhat predictable around the launch of Dune Awakening, but I do hope and think we'll hear something soon. It's been just a bit under 4 months since the last major update, so I'd hope they've been building up to another release at some point relatively soon. Nobody likes silence of course, but I don't think all hope is lost just yet. Anyway, that will wrap us up for today. I wanted to talk a bit about the progress so far on the Age of Fixes and what the lay of the land might be in the future. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching and a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. Do check out the Patreon page through the link in the description. There's early access to videos, wallpapers, video credits and much more, and joining us helps out the channel massively. Take care and I'll see you soon.